right. Well, thank you guys for joining us this evening. We're going to have Christina Glowak give us some information regarding Lyme disease and her family's story with it and how it can affect feeding and eating issues with our children and kind of the experiences she's had, in hopes that everybody listening tonight is going to have a little bit more information on it. And so if you are presented with a family who has Lyme disease, you can have a little bit more understanding of what's going on, maybe some resources, and at least have one point of reference for it. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Christina, to talk.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So hello, Christina. I am joining you from northern Vermont. We just had a big snowstorm, so I'm very happy I still have electricity and internet right now. So I'm really excited to share with you the experience that I and my children have had specific to Lyme. I am a social worker, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I work with children for a living. And both of my children, who are 11 and 8 now, over the course of our Lyme experience, have gone through the process of testing positive, going through treatment, and they are both now negative, which is very, very exciting. I, on the other hand, am still testing positive for Lyme after 5 years of treatment. However, my co-infections at this point are now negative, which is great. So I'll share just a little bit about our story. So for me, in 2014, I started to not feel well, and it wasn't really clear what was going on. It started off as feeling really tired and drowsy, feeling very like disconnected, like you might if you have really, really bad allergies. And I remember being so confused about what was going on. I remember meeting with my allergist, and slowly but surely it started to progress, where all of a sudden I was getting really dizzy. I started having a lot of PVCs. I did not know at the time that they were PVCs, but I would get a lot of tightness in my chest and feel like I was going to black out. I started to experience air hunger and joint pain. And all of a sudden, I started getting migraines, and I've had a history of migraines, but I've never had like rapid migraines happening all the time. And at their worst, I was having over 60 migraines a month, which was wild. So all of a sudden I had a neurologist and a pulmonologist and a rheumatologist. I felt like I had all the ologists, and everybody was kind of focusing on their specific area. And I remember just saying over and over and over again, this is all connected. What is happening? Like, this makes no sense to me. I'm getting inhalers, I'm getting, different medications, and nobody was able to connect all the dots. And at one point, somebody did do a Lyme panel on me, but it was the ELSA test, and it came back negative, which happens a lot, even if there is a positive case. At the time, I didn't really know anything about Lyme disease, so I didn't know to question that. And I ended up on this journey of misery. I mean, it really, truly was horrible. At the sickest, I wasn't even able to drive because of how bad my neurological symptoms were. And it took 2.5 years for me to get a proper diagnosis. And it was actually a nutritionist I was working with, because over this 2.5-year journey, I went from being able to eat everything and anything to most foods making me sick, which again made no sense at all. And this particular nutritionist I got connected with used to work in southern Vermont at a place that actually specialized in treating Lyme disease. And I'll never forget her saying to me, you need to get tested for Lyme, but you need to do more thorough blood work than what your primary care physician is offering. And it was so expensive, and insurance didn't cover it, but my parents gave me the money to do it. And within 2 weeks, I had positive Lyme, Bartonella, and babesiosis. And BART and babesiosis are both co-infections that you can get through a tick bite. And this started my journey of treatment. And I got really sick when I first started. I mean, I was already really sick. I didn't think it was possible to get worse, but it was. And I, at this point, am 5 years into treating, And it's been a combination of so many things. It's been antibiotics, it's been herbal medications, infrared sauna treatments, ionic foot detox, hyperbaric chamber, like you name it, we've done it. And crazy dietary restrictions, gluten-free, dairy-free, egg-free, processed sugar-free. And the dietary piece has been probably for me one of the pieces that I feel like has had a larger impact than some of the other treatments that we did. I actually know several people in Vermont here who also have Lyme and co-infections, and it's been really interesting to see my progress versus theirs. And one of the key differences is that they're still eating sugar, they're still drinking wine. They have not actually followed the dietary recommendations that the doctor, and we're all actually working with one of the same doctors in Northern Vermont, who's a Lyme literate medical doctor. My progress has surpassed theirs. And again, the difference is the fact that I have very much stuck to the dietary recommendations. So through the course of all of this, again, it was October of 2016 that I got diagnosed. We're going along, I'm learning so much, I'm reading books, I'm joining groups. And it was about 2 years later, in July of 2017, so maybe a year later, that my son got a bite on his leg. And it was like a bubbly rash that hurt. And I remember calling the doctor and saying he has some weird bite or he's having a reaction. And I was told it was most likely a spider bite, or maybe he touched like a plant or something and had that kind of a reaction. And I didn't really think much of it. We put a little bit of, ointment on it and moved on. And it was in January, so, almost 6 months later, that all of a sudden, like literally the snap of a finger, like the world fell apart around us. He went from being totally fine, he was 4 years old, totally fine, to all of a sudden having urine urgency, where every 3 to 4 minutes he was panicking because he had to pee, he had to pee, he had to pee. And it was that urgency, but he didn't have to pee. Nothing was coming out. And I remember taking him to the doctor. I remember taking him to the emergency room. And that first week span, we must have been to 4 different doctors before we landed with a pediatric urologist here in Northern Vermont. And the only reason we got in is because I was calling them nonstop saying there is something seriously wrong. He is not testing positive for a UTI. I don't know what's happening, but this is what's going on. And as soon as he'd fall asleep, he was sleeping. He wasn't waking up with this. So we ended up working with urology. They couldn't really figure out what was going on. They did some tests to try to see if maybe it had something to do with his bladder. And, as a 4-year-old to go through any testing, and as a parent to watch your child go through that, it's heartbreaking. And that began what turned into like a month and a half again of this urgency. So how can you be a little kid learning in preschool when all you're doing is focusing on the fact that you have to go to the bathroom? And it was about a month after that happened that all of a sudden he kept losing his vision. He'd go, "Mom, I can't see, everything's white, everything's white." And then he'd shake his head and then he could see again. And I'm like, what is going on? So we're at the pediatric eye specialist. And I remember taking him to the bike path. He had one of the bikes that you just walk with your feet. It's not like he was going fast, because I was really curious to see if he was really distracted and engaged in a high preference activity, if that vision stuff would still happen. And I remember on that 1 mile, we went 13 or 14 different times. He put his feet down and then I saw him shaking his head, and then he'd start laughing and going again. And at that point, we went to an emergency room up in Burlington because I knew it was the only way I was going to get in with a pediatric neurologist without having to wait months and months and months. And I remember being told that it was a neurological tic. And I'm like, that's not a neurological tic, that's behavioral. He's shaking his head because he doesn't think he can see. And the doctor and I went back and forth a little bit. And I said, no, like he's not shaking his head uncontrollably. Like, I work with kids who have tics. Like, I know what that looks like. I know what that feels like. That isn't what this is. And the doctor told me that I was wrong and that is what it is. And I remember we went home that night and I told him, buddy, we're not going to shake your head anymore. Mommy's afraid you're going to hurt your neck. So when it happens, just squeeze my hands really tight and let's see if you can see again. And it happened and he squeezed my hands. And then a few, 10, 12 seconds later, he could see again and he never shook his head again. And that's when I looked at my husband and I said, we have got to get him tested for Lyme disease. The fact that we're in two different systems of the body, we've now seen two different specialists and people we can't figure out what this is. We have to figure out what's going on and we have to, if nothing else, rule it out. Because again, I had that same experience of this doctor and then this doctor. And 2 weeks later, again, we had positive Lyme and Bartonella results for him. And I remember calling the urologist and talking to the nurse, who was just the sweetest woman in the world, and saying, this is what his test results were. And she emailed me back a few hours later after talking to the urologist. And she just said, that is it, apostrophe, 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 because he had been talking to other urologists in the United States about Trevor's case, trying to get ideas. And when he was connecting with other people, they had reflected on the fact that Bartonella is something that can cause that urine urgency. So here we go, 4-year-old starting Lyme treatment. A lot of the herbal stuff that you have to take is disgusting. As an adult, I have a hard time taking it. So now to have a 4-year-old take that, not an easy process, and gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free. So for me, I was okay with eating salad. He was not about to eat salad. So it was impossible for him to wrap his head around the fact that all of a sudden he couldn't eat pizza and that he couldn't have ice cream. And he now, age 8, 4 years later, is negative for Lyme and Bartonella. Still gluten-free. So over the course of having Lyme, he had a very similar experience to me, where all of a sudden a lot of foods were making him sick that he had never been sick from before. And as we've tried to add gluten back in, it makes him sick. If he accidentally has gluten, he's out of school for a few days after because his stomach hurts so bad. So he has had to very much stay limited with eggs, completely gluten-free. We do a little bit of sugar here and there. But again, this is new. His negative results just came back a few months ago. So we're still in that phase of figuring out how to integrate things back in again. And I got very creative. I had to get creative. The reality is that he didn't understand. He was unhappy. He didn't like the fact that we were shifting his diet while still losing his vision and having urine urgency. There was just so much going on for this tiny little person to process. And one of the things that I did with him is I remember being in the kitchen with him, and he had taken fruit out of the refrigerator and I called it a ninja food. And I'm like, oh, that's your ninja food. You're going to eat that and it's going to help to kick the Lyme's butt out of your body. And it just became this big thing. And he was so into karate at that point. And he had just started karate through preschool. And he just started doing little ninja moves all around the kitchen. And I'm like, oh my God, maybe this is it. Maybe this is what I can say. And this is what I can do. That's going to get him excited about this. It's going to give him some level of control. When I eat this, apple, it's, helping my body fight this Lyme disease to get it out of my body. And it just became what we did, what we talked about. He and I started baking together. And I can't tell you how many disasters occurred in our kitchen, both mess-wise, but also the end result taste-wise. We made a lot of things that were absolutely disgusting because, again, we were trying to do it without sugar. And again, if you're somebody who has, if you're used to eating a cupcake and the cupcake has a bunch of sugar in it and you know what that tastes like, when all of a sudden you're getting something that's sweetened with a little maple syrup or a little bit of honey, it doesn't taste as good initially. And we found some recipes or modified, shifted, created recipes that over time really were hit, not only with him, but for his friends. And that was such a huge celebration for me because I wanted him going to school with cookies and cupcakes and having what all the other kids were eating, but in a way that was going to be safe for him. I had to figure out how to create flavors and tastes. So then when I was adding in the herbal tinctures that he was taking, he was drinking it without being sad. I didn't want him crying, having to take medicine that tastes disgusting. I wanted him to have the experience of like, we're doing this and we're getting so much healthier. And I would say for him, about a year into treatment, the urine urgency had really calmed down. It was still an issue, but not to the degree that it was before. Within 6 months of treating, he was no longer having the vision go away, and knock on wood, we've never had that flare up again. I always feel like when we talk about it out loud, I'm like, don't even say it. And, the urine urgency, I think that especially in first grade, we were still seeing a lot of it. So kindergarten, first grade, really distracted by it, very anxious, very just overwhelmed by that experience of being afraid that he was going to have to go to the bathroom. And, I say that COVID was actually very much a blessing for my family, because all of a sudden he was home with me for 6 months and he didn't have to worry that if he had to go to the bathroom, that all the other kids were going to be saying, "Hey, Trevor, you just went to the bathroom. Why are you going again?" Because little kids are little kids. They ask questions, but for him, it was just such an overwhelming experience. So all of a sudden he's home. There's no pressure when it comes to the bathroom. He has access to all the foods he's allowed to eat all the time without, feeling left out because other kids are eating candy out of their lunch boxes. And over the course of that time, we saw a drastic decrease even in the urgency and the anxiety around it, which was incredible. So, I think when I look at all of the pieces when it comes to the nutritional component for him, by making it a game, by making it exciting, by letting him be a part of it, it was such a critical part of him being able to accept it. And again, feel like he was a part of something. It was a lot. It was a lot for me. Like, I still, to this day, I have such a very, very, very restricted diet. I don't understand what Lyme did to my system. But I have thyroid issues now, which I never had before Lyme disease. I've got Sjogren's now, which I never had before Lyme disease. I'm gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free. Like, I get sick from food. I never had this issue before. So whatever happens through this process of having Lyme and co-infections has wreaked absolute havoc on my system. And again, for Trevor, we do some eggs, but not a lot. He's still 100% gluten-free because he can't eat it. He gets horrible stomach aches from it now. And it's not just my experience. So many people, I've been running Lyme groups for the last, since 2017 is when I started that, just as a way to connect with other people. And the amount of individuals I know that have had similar experiences for themselves, for their children, for people they know who have Lyme and co-infections, who end up with all of these limitations in their diet. It's a huge amount of people. And I know through my experience that, Lyme disease is still not understood in the way in which I hope it will be someday. I've had people say, "Oh, were you on doxycycline for 25 days and you got better?" And I'm like, no, that isn't what our journey looked like. And maybe for some people, if they get bit and they catch it right away and they get a bullseye, that does do the trick. But in my situation, I never had a bullseye. I never had a rash. I had no idea that I got bit by a tick. Had I known, it would have been maybe easier to figure this out. And for Trevor, even though he had a rash, it was bubbly. It didn't look like anything you see in pictures when you talk about Lyme disease. And my daughter, when she got bit, now looking back at it at the age of, she was 4 as well, she totally had a bullseye. I didn't know anything about Lyme disease. This is before I got sick. And we went to the doctor and they told me it was a spider bite, and I didn't question it. Why would I question it? And 3 weeks after that is when she started having the neurological symptoms. And her experience was primarily neurological. She, at the point where Trevor tested positive, we tested her, and sure enough, she was positive for Lyme only, no co-infections. And she got diagnosed with pediatric migraines, which made sense. I've had migraines my whole life. I'm like, okay, pediatric migraines, that's what it is. But she also had a lot of the stomach issues too, lots and lots of stomach aches. And we very much cleaned up her diet as well, not even realizing what we were doing. We were just trying to figure out why her belly hurt all the time. So she, with treatment, very quickly, I think within a 6 months period, was testing negative, which was a miracle. And she's been 100% fine since. No more, she hasn't had a headache or been dizzy since she, was 6 months into treating for Lyme. And dietary wise, she's been able to add everything back in that she wants. She's also a crazy healthy eater. She's the kid who'd rather have a bowl of sauerkraut than have a bowl of ice cream. So I actually feel like, to some degree, the way in which she eats was why she didn't end up getting sicker than she did, because she's just, she's the kid for lunch who wants a salad. And I'm like, you have to have carbs. You need to have something else with that. Whereas my son, polar opposite of that. So with our stories, I think, all of us had this dietary component. All of us had symptoms that, again, were from the Lyme and co-infections, but it presented so differently in all of us. And when I think of the treatments that we were a part of, again, my son joined me in the hyperbaric chamber. You want to talk about a rodeo? Try being in a little hyperbaric chamber for 2.5 hours with a 4-year-old with urine urgency. Not good. I'd come out with my hair like this and they're like, did you survive? I'm like, barely. But they were amazing. We had one of the little urinal things in there, and they were just incredible, and they worked with us. But we went through all of these different treatment models, and we're better. Even though I'm still testing positive for Lyme, I have very few symptoms at this point, which I'm so thankful for. The most problematic lingering piece that I'm experiencing and that my son is experiencing now is the continuation of the dietary issues with food making us not feel well. So one piece that ended up being very exciting through all of this and being home with lots of free time with COVID is that the kids and I actually wrote a book. And I did want to share just a little bit about that here. So it's called Ninja Foods, which is what we called Trevor's foods that he was eating, and the whole concept behind it. And it's not just for children with Lyme disease. It can be for a child with any medical condition that impacts the nutritional piece for them. It's all about keeping your body healthy and identifying what foods are safe to eat and what foods aren't safe to eat. And, parents could use whatever language they need to use around that. But in the book, it's talking all about, in this situation, Trevor's kicking a little Lyme bug. So it's about helping your body heal and get better. And then the kids can actually go through and point to and find the ninja foods, which are the foods that are healthy for us. And again, if you have a child with peanut allergies, peanuts would not be a ninja food. So they would not point to that. Cupcakes would not be something they'd point to because it could be made with peanut oil. So its parents could very much make this specific to whatever it is that their child is dealing with. And in the pictures, all of the little ninja foods have tiny little ninja masks. And the kids were actually a part of helping me come up with all the illustration ideas, which has been an absolute ball to do with them. And again, very inclusive in the sense of it could be children with diabetes or children with cancer, children with food allergies, really whatever a child might be experiencing where they need to have that dietary piece. And at the very end of it, we included a bunch of the recipes that we've come up with. So everything's gluten-free, everything's processed sugar-free, and it's all of, Trevor's favorite recipes. So I then included pictures of the kids baking everything. And, this is his ninja chocolate banana brownies, cupcakes, or cake. You can make it in whatever mold you want to make it in. And, you know, it was pretty amazing for him to have that experience. I remember in kindergarten making a bunch of those cupcakes, and he was so scared to bring them to school because he thought nobody was going to like them. And I remember him coming home and saying, Mom, they ate every single one. They ate every single one. He was so excited that kids were excited and enjoying the food that he was eating. And I think for our family, you know, I think what's interesting is that Trevor was so little when he got diagnosed. It's like the feeling that you're missing out on something without actually remembering what you're missing out on. You know, Mom, I want, you know, the cupcakes that you see at the gas station. I love those. Can I have one? I'm like, you have never had one of those in your entire life. Even before Lyme disease, Mommy was not buying you those cupcakes. But I think it's just that feeling like he was missing out on things. And, you know, these recipes have really allowed for him to go about his day and have what everybody else has. And everything that we make, we freeze. So we make like an obnoxious amount of it. And then we put it in little individual Ziploc bags, and I throw them in the freezer. And then in the mornings when he's packing his lunchbox, he can have cupcakes, he can have cookies, he can have muffins. You know, he can have any of the snacks that we included the recipes for in the book. And by snack time, they've defrosted, and he has them every day. And it's, you know, been really cool because several of his friends, they now eat those same snacks. The parents have asked for the recipes. We know Trevor can't have gluten. We know Trevor can't have sugar, but he's eating cupcakes at school. I'm like, he is, and they're made with fruit and they're delicious. And they're actually, it's almond flour, you know, so they're unbelievably healthy. I'm not getting an almond into that kid, but he'll eat almond flour. So it's been this really positive experience at the end of what's been a very exhausting for him 4-year period of time. And for me, again, this has been going on since 2014. So I think for me, I will forever be thankful that I got sick with this, because I can't even imagine what would have happened with Trevor and what the progression of this would have looked like for my daughter if I had not had the experience I had with getting sick, to then even know who to talk to get him tested for this. I just know how sick and out of control this got in my own body over that 2.5 years of trying to get a diagnosis. And I watched him 6 months after, which we now know was the tick bite, but again, it didn't look like it. I watched his world crumble overnight. And, you know, it gives a purpose, I guess, for all of the experience that we've had. And to be able to conclude that with the book Ninja Foods, and we basically approved all of the editing and illustrations and everything around the same week that we found out that he was negative for everything. So it's actually putting this really positive, exciting conclusion to, again, 4 years of what has felt very, very overwhelming and chaotic to me. However, that has not been his experience. And I think as a parent, anytime your child's going through anything, your hope is that it's not going to traumatize them, and that you're able to support them and be present with them in the way in which they need, in a way that's going to result in not having just negative memories associated with that time period. And I feel very, very thankful that for him, lots of happy memories. You know, he knows he has Lyme. If we're outdoors, he wants bug spray on. I think he'll always be that way because our perfume of choice is DEET in my family. But I think that, you know, ultimately in life, as he's going through life, when he thinks of Lyme disease, he's going to be more excited to tell people about the book Ninja Foods that he's in than to talk about the fact that he couldn't have sugar when he was little. So yeah, that's our story, and I am happy to share any additional, answer any questions you might all have, or give any more information if anything I shared wasn't clear.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Christina. I learned so much about Lyme disease in just a little bit of time. I know for myself, I didn't know much before, and I definitely didn't know about all of the dietary restrictions that come with it. What are you mentioned, you know, gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free. What other types of dietary restrictions would be common in somebody who has Lyme disease?
I think for several of the adults I know, they are told not to be drinking alcohol. So not to be drinking wine, not to be drinking beer. So that is definitely something. I know that some doctors say to be egg free. I think that I've had two different Lyme doctors I've worked with, and there was a difference in opinion in the sense of what to exclude and what not to exclude. I've really taken the advice of the nutritionist that I've worked with, because over time she has helped me so much. And I feel like she's the reason we even figured out what was going on with me. But I do think it's really individualized. For me, I was so sick and it took 2.5 years for me to get diagnosed. Within that first 6 months, I didn't have to eliminate all of those foods. For me, it was over the course of the 2.5 years that all of a sudden most food was making me sick. I wonder if we had caught it quickly, if that would be my experience today. So I think my food groups that are eliminated are based on feeling sick after I eat them now. But I don't know that that's the experience of everybody with Lyme disease. Trevor has been able to continue to have dairy this entire time without an issue. We did take it away for the initial part of treatment, but when we added it back in again, he didn't have any negative reaction to that. So again, I think it's really something where one would consult with their doctor to figure out what makes the most sense for them. But definitely gluten and sugar are two that you hear most often when people are treating Lyme that they've been told to definitely avoid.
I think it's helpful having the recipes that you guys put together for it all, because I know for the kids that I work with so often, when we have kids who are coming in with various medical conditions and having limited restrictions on they have restrictions on what they can and can't eat, parents often feel so lost on like, what do I feed them now? Like you mentioned, my 4-year-old's not going to eat a salad, and I know that's the healthy food that they're supposed to be eating. And then parents putting that perception on their kids too of like, oh, you can't eat this, you can't eat that, and then the kids start over generalizing this I can't eat to I can't eat everything. So I really liked how you identified like these are the ninja foods. These are the ones that really are going to help you. Yes, there are a lot of scary foods out there for you, but these ones are really good, and giving them some power, that ninja power, I think is really cool.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and I think it was exciting for him because again, he was able to be involved in so much of this. So we live in Vermont, so there's farmers markets all over the place. And when my kids were little, before Trevor even got diagnosed with Lyme, we would play farmers market. Like the kids would make plates and then we'd like go around and sample them. It was just some like quirky thing that they loved doing. And that's one of the things that we put in the book. And, with Trevor, they'd get to make their own plates. And then I actually found these little ninja swords. So they were able to poke everything with the ninja swords instead of toothpicks. But all of a sudden it's fruit and it's cheese, it's, vegetables and olives, and it's a snack, but it's healthy, but it's so much fun. And again, that was the bigger piece for me, is making sure that through this experience, again, just like you said, I never wanted him to identify food as scary. I wanted it to be that I still have so many choices of what I can have.
As a professional working with a family who has gone through this experience, as a feeding therapist and kind of helping rehab a child who is now, they're coming maybe from that place of fear with their food. They've had so many restrictions, they've had so much pain associated with food. What kind of information do you think it would be important for me to maybe share with another parent on kind of how to get through the journey?
Yeah, I think working with a nutritionist who really specializes with pediatrics is really important, because I think there's just so many incredible ideas that they can give. I think one of the pieces for me is just really being aware of how the kid is responding. So I know with Trevor, he can't have gluten. So there does seem to be that heightened sense of like, and just your reaction is the most important piece as the parent, to be like, it's cool, like it's all right, you didn't eat it, or if you did, we're not going to eat any more of it. and just letting them know that we know what to do. We know what to do. So at the end of the day, like, mommy's got you. We're going to figure this out and it's going to be okay. And even if internally you're like, I found that it really is so helpful to just be present in it with them. And I know for me, one of the pieces that I've had to actually work on more with my daughter than with my son is she's older. She's watching out for her little brother. She's lived in this environment of what the food limitations have been. So she's like a hawk. He can't have that. She's more anxious than he is about what he is eating. And for me, just reminding her, like, not your thing to worry about. I'm so thankful that you're watching out for your brother, but it's okay. Like, you don't have to worry about that. The adults can take care of him. That does not need to be your job. And I think just giving that reassurance of, like, mommy's not going to put anything in the bottom drawer of the fridge that you can't eat. So if you open that drawer, everything in there is yours. Have whatever you want. Those are all safe snacks for you. And even in the cupboards, when you open it, because my husband and daughter both eat gluten, there's a bin and it's, everything's individual snack bags already put together. Anything in that bin, have at it. You can have anything and everything in there. Don't eat the stuff on the shelf up above because that's sissy's, but everything in this bin is yours and it's safe. So I think just letting them know and setting things up in a way where they know that they're safe eases a lot of that anxiety.
Okay, that's great. Does anybody else have any questions?
Hi.
Hi.
That was really great. Thank you for sharing your story with us. It's super interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been quite the journey. I feel like for me, just having the opportunity to share about it with everybody or anybody in the medical field, I'm so thankful to be able to do that, because I think the experience of going through this, it makes no sense. You know what I mean? Like, never in a million years would I have thought that having a tick bite would result in me feeling like I can't breathe for 4 years. What is air hunger? I'd never even heard of that before. Never did I think a tick bite would make it so I couldn't drive, because neurologically my symptoms, like thinking, was painful. Like, what is, what I mean? It's just, it's so wild. I never thought that my son would all of a sudden be in the bathroom every 3 minutes because he got bit by a tick. Like, it's not anything that you hear about. You hear people getting bit by a tick, you get a rash, you feel like you have the flu, you take doxycycline and you're better. That's the story you hear. And after living this, I'm like, oh, the story is so much longer.
Is Lyme disease exceptionally high where you live?
So in New England, we have a lot of it, and it's actually interesting. So both of my kids were bit in Vermont. I'm pretty sure I got bit down the Cape on Cape Cod when we were down there, because it was 2 or 3 weeks after we came back from the Cape that I started to not feel well. But we do have, people are very outdoorsy here, and there is a high tick population. And I think about 50% of the ticks, when they're collecting them and testing them, do test positive for Lyme.
And I just wanted to ask you too, where is your book available?
Great question. So it will be available hopefully in the next month and a half. So we are in the final stages right now. We've gotten the copies, so we've done that. They're setting up the website and they're in the process of making the ebook. And when it is available, it will be on Amazon. You'll be able to get it through bookstores. I'll actually have a website, and on Facebook and Instagram, I have pages, and I'll be posting all of the information there as it unfolds. But we are waiting for, there was something on one of the pages, there was like a smudge across it, which was an error on their end, just with like the machine, and they had to reprint the books for me to approve. So once that happens, then it will start rolling out much faster. So hopefully in the next month and a half. But like I said, I'll be posting it all on the website when it comes out. Yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah, thank you again for sharing your story. The book is super cute. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Thank you.
Christine, how many recipes are in there for people?
That is a great question. I should know that off the top of my head, and I don't. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 recipes. Yeah. So those were the ones that my kids, that's like, those are the ones they've been drawn to the most. And Julianne eats all of this stuff too. Whenever we're making it, she's right there as well.
Cool. Any other questions before we close it up for this evening? No. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of the evening.
Great, thank you.